Welcome to Public Health America, a weekly program produced by BronxNet in partnership with Mercy College. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Here on Public Health America, we speak with experts from an array of specialties across the liberal arts and health professions to provide you with not only the best science, but practical tips to live a healthier life. We also celebrate what studies have long documented, namely the unparalleled value of a liberal arts college education by setting the stage to pursue a career of your choice, increase lifetime earnings, and engage in civil debate. Our experts will share decisions they made and support they received that helped them to beat the odds. By sharing one or two life lessons, their stories may provide you with the inspiration and method to realize your dreams. This is Public Health America. Welcome to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. It is a pleasure to have with me today Dr. Shufutinsky of Cabrini University, Assistant Professor of Organizational Development and Change. Anton, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so Anton, I know you're doing some important work about organizational structure and how it impacts health. Tell us a little bit about
Sure. So not just organizational structure, but organization systems in general, right? So a lot of my research looks at an organization and all of the components within an organization that can affect not only the performance of the organization, but the livelihood, the health and well-being and safety of people in the organization. So that means taking a look at leadership, right? And those aspects, not just of performance, but also of job satisfaction, happiness in the workplace, psychological safety, workplace engagement, freedom from fear in the workplace, those types of human factors that are often termed human factor psychology. And they're often side by side with those things that are human factors engineering, like ergonomics, and furniture and those things that cause musculoskeletal injuries and stuff like that. So it's kind of across. My research is really a cross between organization development, change, and leadership with public health, specifically in occupational health and safety.
Sure. So I think, to the general public, prior to the pandemic, nobody knew what an epidemiologist was. I think that with organizational psychology, and I say this with nothing but respect and affection, I think it may be a little similar in that these systems level issues are critically important and have such a huge impact on behavior. If I were to say to you, what's your top three, or if you could affect change at a systems level within an organization, let's call it higher ed, what would your top three be, and what would you try to do?
Well, it is a complex question because organizations are complex adaptive systems. And what that means is that there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of components. And so once you change one component and one piece, and once you put in an initiative or an action, there are potential effects and side effects because every part of an organization is interrelated, right? So when we look at an organization, we can't. It's inappropriate to look at organizations through silos, right? Through lenses of just human resources policy, or just organizational structure, or just culture, right? Or just human behavior within the organization. It's important to understand all of those components, right? Once you shift one, they're interrelated. And so they will affect one another. So if I make changes to my organizational structure, my organizational chart, or the way that work is distributed to the people in the workplace, that's going to potentially affect the way that the processes are done and the way that the systems in the workplace are done, which then has an effect on potentially organizational culture, organizational behavior, right? When an organization, for example, when leadership in an organization goes off on a strategic planning retreat, right? And they decide that they're going to change the strategy and only the leadership is involved. And then they come back They didn't involve the whole system, so there are a lot of dysfunctions that can occur as a result, and then they wonder, why is my change ineffective, right? Why are my change initiatives not working?
So
So if
based
I,
on what you just,
I'm sorry,
so
if I
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, take it away.
No, I was going to say, but if I'm really going to focus on the one thing, right, that really affects an organization and people in the workplace, it's culture, right? There's the statement, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Or culture eats structure for lunch, or culture eats processes for dinner, right? And the perspective there is that culture is very important, and if you destroy or ruin a culture in an organization, it's much harder to rebuild that, and that affects all the other elements within the organization.
That's a great point and well said. So let's go down that path for a minute. I'm trying to decide whether I want to ask you, give me a couple of examples, anonymously or otherwise, of changes that led to enhancing culture versus changes that led to not enhancing culture. Or, like, in other words, so you're saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. I've never heard that, and I love that. I'm going to start using that. Put some legs on that. What are some examples of different cultures within higher ed, and what do we do to facilitate them working? Because sometimes, let's face it, sometimes cultures need to change a little, right?
Of course.
Is that a possibility?
Yeah.
And so how does one facilitate that change while still respecting the history? Is that a fair question?
Sure. So facilitation I mean, it's a great question, because facilitation is the key, right? And in the field of organization development, yes, there are evaluations and assessments and diagnoses that occur, right? So when I consult as well, so when I'm consulting to a corporation or nonprofit, right, I do take a look at the entire organization, and I do a thorough assessment. However, that needs to include the people in the organization, and and the facilitation occurs by, nobody knows the culture and organization better than the people that are in it. And so that facilitation has to include, most of the planning and everything has to be done by the people in the organization, by the leadership, because I'm just an outsider. I'm coming in, I'm giving you my expertise, I'm helping you do an evaluation, right? But it's the organization itself that needs to make the change. So when I come in and I facilitate the change, it's trying to understand, okay, what is affecting the culture, because the culture, there are some studies that show that culture, or some perspectives that show that culture is just a byproduct of everything else that happens in the organization. But there's also the perspective that, yes, you can directly affect culture and change culture, but the way to do that is by making the changes to all those other components in the system. Like, if there's a problem with the structure, right, and the way that work is distributed. So for example, in higher ed, right, if you have if you have 4 different departments, and you have 26 majors, students that are business majors, right, that are coming in, and you have 15 that are coming in that are public health majors, and maybe 10 that are English majors and 2 that are philosophy majors. If you have 4 faculty members in each department, there's a little bit of a difference in the amount of work and how work is distributed, and how the work is accomplished, right? So looking at that entire system is very important. So when we look at culture, right, all of those minor things, such as that perspective, right, that the employees, that the faculty might have about how much they have to teach compared to their counterparts, how much work they have, how many classes they teach, what the research requirements are for them compared to others, or how much time they have to do that. All of those things affect the way that they behave, and how engaged they are in the work, and how much job satisfaction they have. as well as, errors and mistakes and how much sleep they get and all those kind of things. So when you deal with culture, there's just a plethora of different things to look at, and yeah, I'm not sure if that helps answer some of the question there. It's a really
Sure, absolutely. I mean, clearly, loud and clear, what comes over in each of your responses in a slightly nuanced way is the critical importance of inclusivity. In other words, getting the full community to the table
Yes.
to have discussions that involve not just strategic planning, but culture. Look, Management 101, open forums, focus groups, leadership teams that cut across faculty, students, staff, alumni, community members. I mean, we all know this, right? So, but there must be, at your level of understanding, what's the nuance? So let me frame it this way. If you said you consult. So when you consult, and obviously you're not on the inside, what's the added value? What are you saying to them that they don't already know? Meaning, let's do open forums. Let's do smaller open forums. Let's do focus group meetings. Let's do them by faculty versus staff versus students, with separate ones with everyone together. Let's have a group of just students meeting with the president every 2 weeks. Management 101, what are you bringing to the table that fine tunes it a bit?
Sure. Very often what happens in organizations is that, and I mentioned this earlier, is that a lot of the work is done in silos, right? And so people identify a particular problem, right? And they're like, okay, we got to solve this problem. And so they attack that problem individually without understanding the systems view and the systems approach. There's a well-known OD practitioner named David Jameson, Dr. Jameson. I work with him regularly, and he makes the statement that the one with the biggest view wins, right? So it's if you step back and take a look at the big picture, then you can have a better understanding of what's going on in an organization and how all of those pieces are connected and affect one another. In organizations, it is not very common for leaders to do that, right? Especially mid-rank leaders, middle managers, or even senior managers, directors, right? Maybe at the executive level, they have a little bit of a better approach or a better view, but at that middle level, they don't. So it's really being able to step in and have them take a look at the big picture, right? If you're, for example, let's say I have a small window in my front door, right? If I'm 10 feet away from my front door, I see very little. The closer I get to that window, I could see more and more. If I open that door and I step out, right, I could see a whole lot. And so if you look at an organization that way, it's kind of the same thing. And so from an organization development perspective, it's bringing an approach, right, a systems view and a humanistic view, right, to take a look at what are all of the pieces of the system, how do they affect one another, right? Which ones do you have to adjust or work with in order to resolve any diagnostic, any issue that you diagnosed, and how do you do that for the betterment of people, right? Because the whole root of the organization development work, it is said, is to really allow every person to fully participate in their work, right? And that has to do with their health, that has to do with their well-being, but that also has to do with their happiness in the workplace and their development, right, and growth.
A lot of really important points in relation to how organizations function. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, Anton is going to tell us a little bit about his life story as it relates to his undergraduate experience and beyond that set him up to have a profession as opposed to a job. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. We'll be right back.
You can now watch MNN, BRIC TV, QPTV, and SIC TV on BronxNet. Tune into BX Omni, Channel 67 Optimum, 2133 Fios during most Sunday evenings. We'll show you some amazing content from our friends at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Brick TV in Brooklyn, Queens Public Television, and Staten Island Community Television. Every borough represented in the Boogie Down. Epic partnerships for the ages. And catch our new Next channel, produced in partnership with MNN, 24/7 on BronxNet Channel 952 Optimum and 2138 FiOS.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
I've been running code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
That's the way my mind works. I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
Analytics and empathy. That's how I'm getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I'm more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. Stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. So Anton, we always start this part, the second part of the segment with the same exact question, which is, where were you born? Plus a little bit about your formative experiences.
Sure, thank you. So I was born in the former Soviet Union, right? My family, for generations, has grew up in the Soviet Union, right, under a communist regime, and also an authoritarian regime, and being of Jewish heritage, did not have a lot of the opportunities that were afforded to others within that country, let alone the oppressive nature of the government there to begin with. We managed to defect from what was then the Soviet Union, and ended up in refugee camps in Austria first, and then in Rome, before we were given permission to and brought over to the United States. There were some options: Australia, England, Canada, the United States, and my dad at that time was kind of like, whoever takes us first, that's where we're going. And of course, the United States was the first place. So we immigrated to the United States and landed in Brooklyn, New York. And I grew up in the Bayview houses in Canarsie in Brooklyn. And it wasn't it was a rough area. I believe it still is a rough area. Last time I was there, but it was normal, right? It wasn't, for me, it was like, okay, well, this is where we are. This is where we live. I was a little kid, and my parents did what they could for me and my brother. Not really having a profession, not really having an equivalent education to what most adults had here in the United States. My parents did the best that they could. And, they did, work hard and succeed and eventually really stress for my brother and I to get an education, right? And so we could succeed in the future and have some of those things that they didn't have.
Extraordinary story. Where in Russia?
We were in the outskirts of Moscow.
Got it. So I've been to Moscow. I've done research in Novosibirsk, I got a lot of good stories there. Been to Leningrad, St. Petersburg, extraordinary country. Obviously, lots of difficulties then and since. Not the focus of our talk today. When you emigrated to the United States, did you speak English?
I did not.
Okay, so you had to learn that along the way while you were going to school. How old were you when you came to the U.S.?
I was 5 when we left. I was 6 when we arrived in the United States, and I was thrown right into first grade. Not a lick of English, and
Sure.
no other students that were from the former Soviet Union that spoke Russian in the class. So it was like throw me to the wolves. But at that age, I was just trying to absorb it. Right.
Sure. So yeah. So did you do your first grade book report on Dostoevsky? Yes or no?
On Tolstoy.
Even better. Even better. So clearly you faced extraordinary strife that your parents, rose above. And you made it to the U.S. and you made your way to Brooklyn. And you already emphasized this, but your parents emphasized to you and your brother the importance of going to college. Why do you think they did that? And as you got into high school and were thinking about if and when and where to go to college, what went on at that time?
Yeah, so I'll take it back to the Soviet Union real quick and say that my family's from Ukraine and from Russia, and it didn't matter which part of the Soviet Union we were in at the time. Those are opportunities, going to college opportunities my parents did not have simply because of being Jewish, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter that the communist government said religion is not important and everybody's equal, and we all know that's not true from the perspective of that government at the time. And so there were only certain professions that the Jews could be in, right? And one of them was, my dad was a musician, so he was allowed to go to like a musical institute where he really just, I guess it would be equivalent to being a major in accordion, but really it's like a tech school. And that was the highest level of education that he and my mother could get. And so that was something that they really aspired to be able to give my brother and I, is for us to be able to do what we wanted to do. And they understood that meant going to college for from their perspectives. So for me, that was it was just something that was ingrained in us, and it was something that was going to happen from a young age. My path was untraditional, and I could talk about that momentarily, but that was definitely an area of focus for my parents for raising my brother and I.
That's wonderful. It sounds like as a first generation college student in the United States, your parents clearly appreciated, let's put it this way, and I'm fine if you want to revise it, the opportunity they did not have. Yes. That they felt that if you and your brother had, that would set a stage for your future that they didn't have access to, and they wanted you to have that access.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk a little bit, where'd you go? What was your major?
So again, my path was a little untraditional. I, from New York City, we moved to California, to Los Angeles, and I went to a variety of schools up until I graduated high school. And I was accepted to numerous colleges around the country. And, I just didn't think I was ready for college, right, at the time. I knew I was going to go. I knew it was important. But I took a different path, and I joined the military first, right? Also to take advantage of the financial benefits that I would get from the military for college education. And so while I was on active duty, I was deployed here and there, and I was working different shifts depending on which command I was in. I moved every couple of years, but I managed to do some evening education. I managed to get a my bachelor's degree at Chaminade University, where I was stationed in Honolulu at the time. And that I did my bachelor's in biology with a biochemistry concentration. And then after that, I stayed in the military, and they paid for me to go to graduate school. So, went to graduate school at San Diego State when I was stationed there in Master of Science in Public Health in Industrial Hygiene. And then later, the military also afforded me opportunity to go and earn my first doctorate, which was in public health science.
Sure. That's fantastic. My dad went to undergrad on the GI Bill in the 60s post-Korea. So there's little question that GI Bill type of funding for folks that serve is just fantastic and has changed lives in a positive way. So winding down, I mean, you've had a remarkable and extraordinary journey, and you've obviously succeeded, and you've got a great career. You're doing research that you want to do. Your education made that possible. There's a lot of people in the Bronx, in Philadelphia, here where Chestnut Hill College is, that may or may not be thinking of college as a choice because maybe the cost or any other factor. What would you say to them in terms of a young person that's thinking about the possibility of college? What would you advise them to consider, and what would your guidance be in terms of how to succeed in college?
So, it's kind of a broad question as well, but I think that number one is that believe in yourself, and you can achieve, and not everybody's ready to or even knows exactly what they want to study at a particular time. But other options for affordability are attending junior college or community college. I joined the military in order for the ability to pay for college. There are other programs out there that will, even employers that will pay their employees to go to school. So I would say there are opportunities out there. Don't sell yourself short. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to go and be an engineer or a physician but there are a lot of opportunities out there, and there are a lot of different fields of practice. And find something you're interested in, and believe in yourself and trust in yourself, and find people along the way that can help you and that will mentor you, because those are important, and it can be crucible moments in your life where somebody helps you and kind of guides you to success. I had a few of those people in my upbringing.
That's great. Wise guidance and an extraordinary story. I want to thank Dr. Anton Shufutinsky. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care.